Welcome everybody and let's get started. Let's talk justice, visibility and safety. So what is CEIP's connection to human rights? CEIP, as we know, is a global voice for women with its core mission and projects deeply aligned with the principles of the UDHR and the pursuit of human rights, particularly women's and girls. So the webinar theme, Let's Talk Justice, Visibility and Safety, directly reflects CEIP's objectives around justice, because CEIP advocates for equality and equity for women and girls, often working at the UN level and loyalty to address systematic injustices and promote the rule of law. Our projects focus on issues like the elimination of violence, which is a fundamental human rights violation. Visibility. CEIP aims to amplify the voices of women and girls. We challenge stereotypes and ensure that the perspectives are heard in global and local policy discussion. This aligns with the UDHR rights to freedom and expression and participation in government. And safety. A central pillar of CEIP's work is ensuring women and girls live in safe and healthy environments. And this connects directly to the UDHR's rights to security of person and their work in areas like disaster relief and the elimination of violence. Attendees to tonight's webinar, it gives me great pleasure now to introduce Biennium 24-26 President Joanne Yeo to the mic.
Thank you very much, Christine. Everyone, welcome to our SISEAP webinar in celebration of Human Rights Day. Let's talk justice, visibility, and safety. Next slide. At SISEAP, we believe that every woman and girl should have the chance to reach her full potential, follow her dreams, and have an equal voice in building strong and peaceful communities. Our mission is to help to make it happen by transforming the lives through education, empowerment, and enabling opportunities that will enable our women and girls to thrive. Next one. Next slide, Christy. At SISEAP, we work in 13 countries as shown on the map: Australia, Cambodia, Fiji, Hong Kong, Indonesia, Malaysia, Mongolia, Myanmar, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, Samoa, Singapore, and Thailand. Next one. Today, we will be hearing from 4 countries that are pushing forward justice in challenging times, especially in the rise of cyber violence. We'll also look at how young women and children are being protected, and importantly, how Sriuidhya can play a meaningful role in supporting these efforts. Global statistics don't help us much because each of our countries experience different levels of cybercrime with unequal impacts and vulnerabilities. Southeast Asia, I'm afraid, has the highest cases of modern slavery, driven by heightened vulnerability of youth to online predators. Although Southeast Asia is among the world's strongest performers in SDG 9, which is especially in technological innovation accelerated after COVID-19. So while we have international statistics on women, they don't ever capture the full story or include the children and young people we are so concerned about. I would now like to pass the time over to Dr. Donnell Davis, who is the moderator of this webinar. Donnell, on to you.
Hello, how are you? We're very honoured to have 4 very compassionate and intelligent women meeting with us today. so rare to have these wonderful people with similar passions to get together. So I'd like to introduce one by one. We have the CVs, please. If I introduce you now, then we can get into the finer detail shortly. So could I have the next slide, please? I'm having technical difficulties here, but let's work with it. So Dr. Lorainne Finlay is a very special woman, has an amazing background, as everybody else does in the room. She leads the work at the Commission, and her background has been in modern slavery and emergency responses. Of course, in our region, that's definitely something really important that we have to deal with all the time. Refugees and asylum seekers, business rights and human rights together, which is a real trick, and the technology and human rights was what we're going to concentrate on today. Prior to the Commission, she was a lawyer and an academic. She holds a PhD from University of Queensland, yay! Oh, I'm a bit biased there. And a dual masters from New York University and Singapore. And that also gives her a really good understanding of our regional issues. In the past, she's worked in as a trafficking specialist, hopefully not at the front end of that, but preventing it in the ASEAN countries. And she's been a state prosecutor in West Australia at Department Public Prosecutions. So we're very honoured to have Lorainne with us today. Our next speaker will be Sunjid, if she's online. Okay, she is the Chief Commissioner in Mongolia. So she's only been appointed in 2024, but her impacts are already quite significant. She's been meeting with other human rights commissioners and systems around the world, and that's made her really sharp and effective in the role that she's playing, but also the other commissioners she has in her area. You can read much quicker than I can speak. So because of her diverse background, she's also been put in some really interesting positions, which when we realise that democracy has only been introduced in 1993, there's been some real challenges to come up to speed and be one of the leaders in some of these areas. So that's quite marvellous. We've also, in 2025, this year, she's had some honourable positions, really wonderful positions, and being on the Council, the Human Rights Council for the UN. She's also presented a sexual abuse, child abuse report, asking for urgent action, and she's engaged with the World Justice Project, and the hot links are there, and we will be circulating them as well on our website after today. Now, our next wonderful person is Sriuidhya Ganapathy. Ganapathy, I'm getting better. She is our Malaysian representative. Now, she is a human rights commissioner, but the work that she does is quite considerable. Not only does she do the legal issues, she also does online and special training for children. So the Talisman Project is really special, and CRIB stands for the Child Rights for Innovation and Betterment. So what she's doing is bridging the gap from law and the systems in government right down to the children and strengthening them and making them aware of how to protect themselves and their friends. So she also is in court quite a lot of the time, so we're very privileged to have you out of court. I know you were in court till about an hour ago. She also holds a Child Rights Festival, which sounds absolutely wonderful, and the training judiciaries is to also help other people who are dealing, especially legal people who are dealing with child issues, who might not be used to doing that. The outreach program is even wonderful, and I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about it today. Now, our last speaker, our last panellist, is Sylvia Heywood. She is a seroptimist from New Zealand. She looks after program and policy for New Zealand. Now, we've been working with the Human Rights Commission, working I met them recently. The Human Rights Commission only just got appointed High Commissioner a year ago, and there's now 3 specialist commissioners that work with Stephen Rainbow. However, they weren't at 9:30 at night. They weren't necessarily able to help us out this time. However, we have a statement from their office, and Sylvia is going to read that out and probably add a little bit more, because she's done quite a bit of research in this area, and she's the right person to translate what's happening over there on the ground to and make the bridge and the link with Srioptimists. So thank you, ladies, for joining us tonight. And we have women. I expected a few men, but anyway, we're doing well. What we're going to cover tonight is actually these 3 questions, and one at a time. I'll ask you one at a time. But the questions really are, what are the most burning issues for your country right now? And each of you are going through different circumstances, and we need to understand as Srioptimists what you're facing and what urgencies and what special things you're having to deal with right now, so that we know how to connect with you. The second question, of course, relates to our Orange, and this is our 16 days of Orange, is the cyber violence. The theme for this year, for the 16 days, from the 25th of November to the 10th of December. So the 25th of November is to Stop Violence Against Women Day, and then the 10th of December, yesterday, was Human Rights Day. So those 16 days, we have silent protests by wearing orange, but we have loud protests as well. And we do a lot of advocacy and awareness. There's been marches through our streets in our cities. There's been lots of wonderful ways that we've been engaging. So the second question really relates to the cyber violence for women and children in particular, but we understand children includes our boys who are at risk of manosphere influences. However, what the theme of Human Rights Day this year is about, what can we do every day to make a difference? So that's why we've blended that question to look after both the Human Rights Day theme and the 16 days theme for this year. And of course, we want you to give us recommendations, which is our third question. Give us recommendations for what we can do. We've got 129 clubs in our regions, in our 13 countries, and we have got most wonderful people who are doing wonderful work. And we need to make sure that we're being effective and we're doing the sorts of things that are going to help human rights commissioners, but also help get us on the right path in the most effective way. So every hour makes a difference, every dollar makes a difference in the right directions. So that third question will actually be our access to justice, and the mandates that you give us, or the recommendations that you give us, will feed into what we're doing at the Commissioner Status of Women in March. So that's the theme for next year, 2026, which is just around the corner. So that third question will help us be able to be most effective in the way that we act and the way that we do things for the Commission for the Status of Women, for International Women's Day, but also how we can have projects, ongoing projects that are terribly effective. So on that note, I'd like to, I've already introduced Sunjid, but thank you for joining us. I know it's difficult with some of our technology issues, and I'm the one who's having interesting issues as well, but I'm here with you. So I'd like to ask, first of all, Lorainne, what are the most burning issues that you're having in Australia at the moment? And then I'll go on to Sunjid. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm so delighted to be with you all today. It's always really inspiring to be in a room full of incredible women who are making positive change in their communities, even if it's an online room. But I find this question really difficult, because when we're talking about human rights, you can't rank the importance of human rights issues in terms of how do you say to an Indigenous woman in Australia who's escaping domestic violence that the human rights issues she's suffering are more or less important than a migrant woman in Australia who's trying to escape from modern slavery. And so you can't say that any one issue in and of itself is more important than others. To me, the most burning human rights issue for any individual I talk to is the issue that they're experiencing and the experiences that they have. Having said that, there are clearly a number of really deep challenges that we're facing in Australia, and that over a long period of time have shown a real gap between the promises we've made to the world through the treaties that we've signed and the things that we're actually delivering on the ground. And, you know, just to give a couple of examples, despite over 15 years of targets aimed at closing the gap in Australia, there is still a significant gap of entrenched inequality and disadvantage faced by too many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and particularly by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women. And, you know, despite Article 4 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights declaring that no one should be held in slavery or servitude, we know the global estimates of 50 million people around the world currently living in conditions of modern slavery. And Joanne mentioned earlier the particular issues we face in our region with that respect. But here in Australia, we can't dismiss that as being an issue that occurs in other places, because we know that there are estimated to be 41,000 people here in Australia living in conditions akin to modern slavery. But I think the issue that I really wanted to highlight tonight is the issue around safety for women and children, because we know that every single one of us has a right to live safely and free from violence. But despite the Australian government investing over $3.4 billion to support women's safety and the National Plan to End Violence Against Women and Children, we know that in 2023-24, a woman in Australia was on average killed by an intimate partner every 8 days. Every 8 days. And the thing that always strikes me when I give that statistic is it's shocking in and of itself, but you have to remember those aren't just numbers, and that behind those statistics are real individuals who had hopes and dreams for their futures, who have children and families and loved ones, and who have left a real hole in their community by no longer being with us. So I think in a country like Australia and anywhere in the world, we can't accept that as being something that we're prepared to allow to happen without action. But then the final thing that I wanted to say before we move on, Danelle, is that while those statistics and those issues are really significant and massive challenges, it's also important not to lose sight of the positives. And so while I know that Australia is not perfect when it comes to human rights, and we have really big challenges that we're facing, I'm also really proud to be the Australian Human Rights Commissioner, because in so many respects, we are making progress in addressing issues, and we are world leaders in terms of what we're trying to achieve when it comes to human rights. And I do think in a room like this, it's important to remember that while we have some really big challenges ahead of us, you know, as a woman, I'm so conscious of the fact that I've had opportunities that my mother and my grandmother never would have dreamed of, and that enormous progress has been made in a really short time. And that what keeps me motivated in my role is knowing that I want my daughter to have opportunities that I never had, and to be able to live in a world that sees gender equality not just as an ideal that we have written into all of our international treaties, but as a reality that's actually her day-to-day life, and something that she can just take for granted, rather than being something that we have to keep at the front of our mind as a human rights challenge. Because that basic idea that every single human being should be equal in rights and dignity, that shouldn't be an ideal. It should be something that we deliver in every single day of our lives.
Wow, what a what a wonderful introduction. So I'd like to go to Sunjid now. Sunjid is from Mongolia, as I reiterated early. So over to you, Sunjid. Thank you. Do you need me to ask the question again? What is the most burning issue in your country at the moment? Are you having trouble with your sound? Yeah, okay. worst comes to worst, get into your mobile and try that one if we're having problems. Okay. In that case, while Sunjid's solving those issues, we have time, Sunjid, don't worry, you're not going to be missed out at all. I'd like to hand over to Sri, that's her nickname, Sri Ganapathy, and she is from Malaysia. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Sriuidhya, Ganapathy, thank you. So for Malaysia, the most urgent human rights issue is what is happening to children's rights in the digital space. At least that's the most urgent right. That's the most urgent human rights to me. I take very much what Lorainne said earlier. Everybody has their own issues, right? We are in danger of losing sight of the fact that children are rights holders online. They do not stop being children or stop having rights to information, expression, and connection just because the space is a screen. Yet the way we are responding to online harm is often driven by fear, moral panic, and the urge to control rather than a clear rights-based framework. Right now, we are effectively unleashing toddlers into the jungle and then blaming them for being eaten or mauled. And the jungle is the digital ecosystem, the platforms, the design, the business model. Children are not the problem. The environment we are putting them into is. Our systems still operate on three outdated assumptions. First, that parents alone can manage this. We have built an entire digital economy around children without equipping parents, teachers, or frontline adults with the training and support to understand what is happening on those screens. Second, that children can be kept offline. Malaysia has announced a ban on social media next year. Australia has already announced it. Belgium has announced it. The reality is, however, that gaming, social platforms, messaging apps, and video platforms are now part of everyday life. For learning, for social connection, for play, taking devices away does not remove risks. It simply pushes children to access the internet in more secretive, less regulated ways. It's always the case. If you ban something, it means you lose the opportunity to regulate it. Third, that online harm is misconduct to be punished, rather than trauma that can shape a child's mental health, relationships, and sense of safety for years. On top of that, technology is outpacing our laws at an exponential rate. When we drafted stronger laws in Malaysia in 2017 and then again in 2023 to protect children from online sexual abuse, we had no real idea of how fast AI and generative technology can change the landscape out there. It's not just changed the landscape for children, it's changed the landscape for all of us. Where we are today in 2025 is so far from where we were just 2 years ago. And it's scary. In 2025, we are seeing predators use chatbots and AI generated images to sextort children. So they are using AI to pretend that it's a child talking to another child. They are using chatbots and then they are impersonating peers. They create fake images. They threaten to leak content that children have unwittingly created, thinking that they are in a safe space. And because children have not been trained and do not feel safe telling adults about their problems, many of them are trying to fix the problem on their own. They find ways to pay off predators with money, with in-game currency, and most frighteningly for me, by producing more images of themselves or of other children, or even of going down and having physical sexual relationships with these predators in an attempt to settle the blackmail, the extortion. Much of this goes unreported. Yes, it's happening. It's happening a lot. And much of this is going unreported because children are ashamed, terrified of punishment, deeply unsure that adults will help them rather than blame them. And that, to me, is the burning human rights issue. A rapidly evolving landscape of digital harm, especially sexual extortion and cyber violence, in which our children, are essentially navigating alone, while adults and systems remain largely unaware or focused on the wrong levers. And we are all talking about bans and things like this. And we are feeling like, okay, I've done this. I've banned I banned social media. I'm protecting my kids. You know, we're saying these kind of things. I've taken away my child's
Okay.
phone. I've controlled the Wi-Fi. You know, it's very scary.
I think you're answering the second question, but look, you've done very well. That's burning for Malaysia, and I
Oh, it's burning
understand.
for me.
Yeah, but I mean, even though you've brought new legislation in a week or so, no, a couple of weeks ago, that doesn't necessarily mean that it translates to action. So we'll talk. I mean, you've really well defined the issue that we're talking about today. So thank you so much for that. Now I'll just see if Sunjid is available, and if she's not, I'll go across to Sylvia. So. Sylvia, are you happy to read the answer that the New Zealand Human Rights Commissioner had given to us, or would you like to do a summary at the end?
No, I have added a little bit. I can read the statement. So I'll go with question 1. So I'll just go a little bit before that. So thank you very much for inviting me, Danelle, and warm greetings to everyone joining us online today. Before I dive into the panel question on behalf of the New Zealand Human Rights Commission, I'd like to briefly position New Zealand so you have a sense of the demographic and social landscape that shapes our human rights challenges. So New Zealand is home to just over 5.2 million people. We are a diverse country. 67.8%, approximately 3.4 million, are said to be European. 17% Maori, they are the second largest group. 8% Pacific peoples. Rapidly growing Asian population, which is now more than 15%. Over 1 in 4 New Zealanders are migrants, nearly 1 in 4 are disabled people, and we have a small but increasingly visible rainbow and gender diverse community. This is one of our greatest strengths, but it also means our human rights landscape is complex and inequities affect some groups more deeply than others. So our most burning human rights issue now, the Human Rights Commission has released a Human Rights in Aotearoa, New Zealand 2025. The report highlights that while many New Zealanders do enjoy a high level of civil and political rights, there are groups for whom progress has stalled, and in some areas, risks are emerging of us going backwards. Maori, Pacific peoples, disabled people, transgender and non-binary people, and migrant workers continue to experience discrimination and disadvantage at higher rates. A particular concern is the frequent use of urgency in Parliament, which reduces time for public input, even when proposed laws have been flagged by the Attorney General as inconsistent with the Bill of Rights Act. Several recent bills and reforms risk weakening human rights protections, diminishing security commitments, and reducing meaningful civic participation. At a broader level, the international rules-based human rights system, the foundation for how we treat one another, is increasingly challenged globally. The Commission reminds us that human rights are not abstract. They're about how we live together and uphold each other's dignity. Thank you, Danelle. That's the first question.
Well done, well done. Okay, now Sunjid, do you have some sound yet? I'm sorry, we can't hear you. I know, and you've prepared for this and it's been important. Now, can you jump on your mobile phone? The mobile phone sometimes is easier to navigate than the go-to. I'm sorry, I can't help. And technology behind you. Christine and Cesarina, is there any more we can do for Sunjid at the moment?
No, other than just checking whether the it needs to be unlocked. her mic might need to be unlocked up in the top menu bar to the left-hand side. If there's something there that says unlock mic. Otherwise, yes, I would suggest that she Sunjid goes out and tries coming in on her mobile.
Right. Well, I'm sorry, Sunjid, I'm in the same situation and I'm the one asking the question. So don't feel bad. I'm also in that situation. Okay, well, that was a wonderful introduction by the other countries. We will get Sunjid a chance to speak properly, and I think she's written answers as well. So we want to make sure that we're learning from Mongolia because they've just come so far, so fast. And I think that's something that we can learn definitely from each of our countries. So I might go on to the next question, which is really on about cyber violence itself and what can we do every day to make a difference. We had a few ideas that Sri had shared with us, but I'd like to ask Lorainne again, would you like to talk specifically about this really touchy subject that I understand that you spent 3 days locked up dealing with this, and you must be hot to trot. So we're really keen to hear about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I really wanted to start by just echoing the discussion that we've just had around the digital ecosystem, particularly for children, and, you know, the natural response that I think we all have because we want to protect our kids. You know, we want to keep kids safe online and in digital spaces. And so I think the natural tendency is to say, well, we should stop them from accessing it. And certainly in Australia, we have just had take effect yesterday, the social media ban for under 16s, which means that Australian children who are under 16 are no longer able to hold social media accounts. And, you know, I have to agree with the idea that while it's natural to want to protect our kids and while we should be doing more to keep them safe online, the answer isn't just to ban them. The answer is actually to make those online spaces safe and to actually put the responsibility not on our kids, but actually on the technology companies to make their products safe, on all of us as parents and in the wider community to guide our children, to educate them, to create awareness so that they can engage in a safe way in what has become just an absolutely enmeshed part of our lives. So I think in terms of thinking through technology, human rights and children, it is really important that we remember children do have human rights just like the rest of us. And if we simply try to ban them from things, we actually aren't in the long term helping them to develop the skills they need to navigate the world in a safe, ethical and human rights enlivening way. And I liken it with the social media ban to knowing, for example, that there's danger in taking your kid to the beach. You know, water can be really dangerous for children, but we don't ban them from the beach. We choose to teach them to swim and teach them to engage safely in activities that can bring benefits as well. And I am concerned in Australia about the fact that it is the children who are the most disadvantaged in terms of, for example, children in remote and rural locations or children who are already marginalised, like our LGBTQIA+ community, who actually really do find their spaces online and find their communities online. And I think they're the children that are going to be most impacted by this. And the risk is that we are channeling children into spaces that are more unsafe and more dangerous rather than being able to work with them to make sure that they can engage in online spaces safely. But in terms of cyber violence more generally, I really think the key message I wanted to bring tonight is that we need everybody to be engaged in a multifaceted response. And what I mean by that is there is an important role for legislation to play. So, for example, in Australia, just recently, so last year we passed some legislation criminalising basically deepfake sexual material. So introducing new federal offences that target the creation and distribution of non-consensual deepfake sexual content via internet services. And that was designed to really tackle an emerging issue that really particularly affected women and children in terms of the use of deep fakes to spread sexual violence and cyber violence. But we also have things other than laws that are really important. So, for example, we've actually embedded digital and technology facilitated abuse, like online harassment, grooming and coercive control, into our national plan to end violence against women and children. So there are specific policy measures embedded in that plan to promote early intervention and education, including things like respectful relationships training and digital consent resources for adolescents, and plans for both things the government and the broader community need to do to help ensure women and children can be safe from cyber violence. And we also have other things like our e-safety commissioner, for example, running a Preventing Tech-Based Abuse of Women's Grants program, which is designed to fund NGOs, universities and community organisations to help develop really innovative tools that are designed to target cyber violence and tech-based abuse. And that's things like digital self-awareness or self-defence training, awareness campaigns, anti-harassment software, a whole variety of things to really try and tackle this problem from a variety of aspects. And then in terms, Danelle, of the question about what can the members of Sriuidhya International do, we've just had Human Rights Day yesterday, and I'm always reminded on Human Rights Day particularly of the answer that Eleanor Roosevelt gave back when she was out promoting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and trying to encourage its adoption, when she was asked, well, where do human rights begin? And we often think about human rights in terms of international treaties, big government decisions, international conferences. But actually what she said in terms of where do human rights begin is that they begin in small places close to home. And so I think the thing that we can all do is human rights living in our day-to-day life. And that can be as simple as just ensuring we're kind to each other, that we show respect to each other, that we engage in those values in all the small things we do, because I strongly believe those things the everyday level, they translate into the big changes that we need to see. The truth is, when it comes to cyber violence, the law, as we've already mentioned, is really slow compared to the way that technology is evolving. So we can't wait for governments or the law to solve these problems. We actually, all of us in the community, thinking about what small steps we can take to exhibit respectful behaviour, to engage safely online, and to ensure there's education and awareness throughout the entire community.
I'm having difficulty hearing you, Lorainne. Is anyone else having difficulty? Right, well, we might come back to that.
Just come back, but I had just finished Danelle, so that was good timing.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you short at all, but you have another bite of the cherry shortly. Okay, so Sri, would you like to share your what can we not what Sriuidhya do, but about specifically cyber violence, where you specialise lately, especially recently, and some of the programs that you're doing, and how and I want to hear about more of what you're doing. Thank you. You're on mute. You're on mute. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I want to start by saying that actually in Malaysia, we're deeply grateful for the Australian Police's cyber team. Some of our biggest child sexual offence cases were first alerted to us because of their systems. So, just giving a shout out there because Lorainne brought it up. They're doing a great job. The other thing that I'd like to peg is that unlike everyone else on this panel, I'm not a human rights commissioner. And so I get to pick just one topic, and I'm just going to speak on online safety for now. There are many other pressing issues in Malaysia. We've had a series of terribly troubling things happening to the LGBTQ community in the last couple of weeks, and that's deeply distressing to us. But I have to focus on your burning issue. So having said all that, I'd say at CRIB, we're trying to respond to cyber violence on women, children, and adolescents on 3 fronts. So we're doing training, and we're pushing for safety by design. and we're really resisting knee-jerk solutions by the government that actually make children less safe and actually take away a lot of their rights. I mean, Lorainne was absolutely right. A lot of children rely on their online worlds to get them through the day. You know, there's so many issues, and a lot of the times, even me, I mean, I think a lot of adults also, we find our communities online now. Where once we used to be alone, we can actually find similar weirdos, similar people who have got weird things, and they're collecting spoons or they're collecting, you know, we find our families now online. And to say that children would be barred from that, it's just not thinking about their rights. So firstly, we put training before policing. And at the Talisman Project, which is our youth arm, we train children to recognize grooming, sextortion, digital coercion, and bullying in the specific spaces that they use. Not with vague slogans like "don't talk to strangers." You know, we grew up with "don't talk to strangers," but with concrete scenarios. What it looks like when someone offers game credits for pictures, when someone you meet in a game starts asking for secrets or photos, when a stranger threatens to leak something unless you send more. Um, we train parents and teachers in how to respond without panic or punishment. And this is a real challenge because also we are still a very conservative country. We are Asian. So a lot of the times parents respond with, how could this be done by my child, rather than how could this happen to my child, you know? Because if a child thinks, if I tell my mom, she'll take away my phone, or she will ground me, or if I tell my teacher, they will shout at me and call my parents, that child is going to stay silent and will try to manage it alone. And usually, I'm sorry to say, most of the time when children think that they're managing alone, it's not viable solutions that they're coming up with. And if children are too scared to tell us, then we have already failed them. I'm really appreciative of the question, Donald, because it doesn't limit itself to women and girls. At Crib, we're very deliberate about including boys in our work. Boys are not only potential perpetrators, they are also victims of bullying, sextortion, and recruitment into violent online spaces. And we really recognize the fact that we cannot make the world a safer space for girls and women if we don't start by speaking to boys first about respect, consent, and how they act when they see harm. Secondly, we push safety by design. So we have to move beyond the idea that age restrictions or bans on social media are enough. We are not alone in this. UNICEF, in its Human Rights Day statement yesterday, has also said this clearly. Age limits on their own will not keep children safe online. Children will still find ways to go online, and once they do, they may end up in spaces that are even less regulated and harder to monitor. So our focus is on design. Platforms that make money from Malaysian children should meet Malaysian safety standards. That means privacy by default for minors. It means friction and limits on direct contact from strangers. It means safer chat and reporting tools and real moderation capacity, not a bot. And it must cover the full ecosystem that children actually use. Because children don't only meet strangers on what we traditionally call social media. You know, we say social media bans, but children are meeting people on Discord. They meet them on Roblox, which is a game. They meet them in games like Wiz. They meet them in things, innocuous things like Candy Crush and YouTube. Things that you think, oh, that's okay. You can play Candy Crush on my phone. And children are actually on chat rooms in that, or they have friends in them. They meet them in the comments. They DM them on YouTube content. The YouTube content these days are targeted at children. So for example, you can find videos. If you the algorithm for YouTube is, if you search something, then the next 10 videos will be similar kind of content that comes up. Everyone who uses YouTube knows this. But if you're a child and you search, for example, Spider-Man or Cinderella, the chances are you might meet up with a video where Spider-Man is having sex with Cinderella. I'm not even kidding about this. It's there, right? So these are social spaces by another name, and our safety frameworks have to reflect that. But remember, these are our social spaces today. By the time we come up with social frameworks, well, this is evolved because the predators, their tech is much, much higher or better than ours, no? Third, we really speak openly about the new forms of cyber violence that are emerging. Everyday cyber violence now includes AI-driven extortion, deep fake threats, and highly targeted harassment. women, girls, and increasingly boys are pulled into these situations through platforms that are woven into their daily lives. And I'm seeing this happen to even children that I have trained. So I've trained children, I've alerted them that these are the kind of things that you can come up. But even then, the children fall into traps because the person that they're chatting with, and you know, you have to remember children are much more advanced technologically than us. If you show your child or any child that you know, if you show them a video, they look at it, they'll just take one glance and they say, oh, that's AI, that's not real. They'll tell you that. But even children are being scammed these days when they don't realize that the person that they're speaking to is not a real person. If our public narrative stays at the level of kids are on their phones too much, we will never ever reach the real issues. We also try to hold the line against reflexive responses from government, from politicians that sound strong but are harmful in practice. For example, blanket social media bans for children. Recently in Malaysia, we had calls for children to be given dumb phones only. These measures may feel satisfying for adults, but they don't address design, they don't address training, and they really risk eroding children's rights to information and expression. And they push children into back channels, shared devices, and hidden accounts where it is much harder to spot when something has gone wrong. I mean, something simple like children can download an app that looks like a calculator on their phone, and then they can hide nudes, porn, stuff behind that calculator. So if you're a parent and you're feeling very comfortable, oh, I check my child's phone every day, you probably don't click on this calculator to see what's there, you know. We would never, I can see a bunch of you now going home and checking your children's phones for their calculator. I'm just giving you an example. There are other apps. I'm not an expert in this. I'm just saying that there are many ways for children to hide content or to hide their interactions online. We would never respond to traffic deaths by saying children must never cross the road again. Instead, we teach them to cross the road safely. We tell them, okay, you look right, you look left, you look right again. Same thing Lorainne said, we don't ask them to swim, right? We don't say don't swim. So we redesign roads around them. We give them safety warnings when they go swimming. We put up signs saying tide is in or strong waves. Navigating the digital world should work the same way. We cannot simply tell children not to go online. We must teach them how to move through that space safely and redesign the environment around them. And this is the most important work that I do.
I was really impressed, and CRIB, C-R-I-B, has got hot links and has some wonderful information online, but it's so much better to hear from a human. Okay, Sunjid, it sounds like you have fast sound, so I would love so lovely to hear you. Could I hand over to you to talk to us about Mongolia and the first and second question, if you feel like it? Thank you.
Thank you, Donald, and thank you, colleagues. Sorry for the trouble. So it's very important to organize this event, and I would like note this importance and also information sharing from other countries. Well, what is the burning issue in Mongolia? We have a lot of human rights burning issue, of course. In larger sense, our burning issue is poverty and corruption. Now, today, related to the gender discrimination and gender-related issues, we have a problem with the domestic violence. Combating domestic violence we should address this domestic violence issue, because in recent years, in last 10 years, we had a lot of done. We revised our laws, and we established new shelters, and we made a lot of measurement, a lot of activities against the domestic violence, and we made a lot of public awareness activities. But the numbers and statistics, if we look at the numbers, domestic violences are not decreased. So that's why it's one issue that we should address. And another large issue is this girls' pregnancy. pregnancy among the girls and teenage, it's another issue, and the numbers is increasing annually. So we are talking among the NGOs and government authorities, but Human Rights Commission of Mongolia thinks our position is that we are not doing enough activities against these girls and teenage pregnancies. So third issue is it's related to the technology-assisted gender-based violences. Yeah, as you just mentioned in your speech, that it's good that we have this digital platform. We use it every day. So I heard that Australia has banned recently for the children, but today in Mongolia, 83% of population, we are using smartphones, smart items, and every children have this access to the digital platform. And negative impact is that they are victims. They will be victims. They are going to be victims of this digital cyberbullying, cyber discrimination, cyber stalking, cyber exploitation, etc. That's the one issue. That's why National Human Rights Commission was covered that topic in our 24th annual report, and we analyzed all the statistics, numbers, cases, and our conclusion is our law is not detailed, formulated all kind of this cyber criminality. So offenses, it's not so detailed, distinct, formulated. That's why in international convention, they are talking about 36 different offenses, violations. And now in our laws, we can find 14. So that's why, first of all, we need to do something related to legal framework, and second one, we have to really address that issue. That's the everyday. It's happening every day. That's why public awareness is also very important, because if the young people, if the children, if the youth, if the adolescents and teens, if they know the negative impact, then they can actually protect themselves. It's the important way. That's why public awareness among the children and among the youth is very important. How to protect this privacy, how to protect all these private pictures, photos, private information, etc. And in case that they are victims of that kind of offenses and violations, then where to go? We should actually inform about this possibility, how, where, when can they make a complaint. So that's another issue. So, and maybe I'll speak further. My time is, I guess. How is the time, Donna?
I think you've been very good at covering a lot, but I still want you to come back and give us recommendations. I need to go to Sylvia. So Sylvia, to talk about the New Zealand situation, where it comes to specifically the new legislation that came through at the end of November, and some of the things that happened in New Zealand. And I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you, Danelle. So how is New Zealand addressing cyber violence against women and children? The statement I have says New Zealand's current laws provide only limited protection against online sexual and gender-based violence. Under the Harmful Digital Communications Act, victims carry the burden of proving harm a barrier that often discourages reporting. Online abuse is widespread. Research by Amnesty International shows 1/3 of women in New Zealand experience online harassment. Women in public-facing roles, especially Wahine Maori, Pacific women, ethnic women, disabled women and trans women are particularly targeted. The Human Rights Commission is calling for stronger regulation of digital platforms. This would strengthen online safety, such as requiring social media platforms to meet clear safety standards, like faster removal of harmful content, stronger protections for children, and real consequences when platforms fail to act. They also need proactive prevention strategies. So things like including digital literacy programs in schools, public campaigns that challenge online misogyny, specialised training for police and teachers, and well-funded support services that help victims report abuse and remove harmful content. They also need a better recognition of online sexual and gender-based violence as a serious human rights issue. Ultimately, a safer online world is one where all women and girls, including those most marginalised, can participate with confidence, free from fear. And every one of us has a role by calling out harmful behaviour, both offline and online. We help shift the culture and signal that violence is never acceptable. And Danelle, you were referring to, I think, conversation we had earlier. Harmful Digital Communications Act 2015 was amended in 2022. The legislation addresses digital age harms, online harassment, cyberbullying, non-consensual sharing of intimate images, threatening or offensive communications, hate speech, and other harmful digital behaviours. It provides civil and, in some cases, criminal remedies and pathways for redress. Yeah. So,
well, actually, the stuff that just came through last week was actually under the Crimes Act. You know, you picked it out as stalking and harassment. So when it starts online, it ends up being real. And I think that was the part that was frightening us.
Right. Yes. Yes. So Karen Shaw, I think, introduced or certainly spoke to a bill about stalking, and so now I believe that that is in process. A stalking bill, which was part of a criminal acts legislation, which I've not got in front of me at the moment, Danelle, but
that's fine. That's fine. It would have been wonderful to have the real commissioners here, but you've done a lot of homework and you've brought us a perspective from the community and what Srioptimus do. So I guess the last question for us, and I'll go to Sunjid first because she hasn't had enough time. What would you like Srioptimus to do? What recommendations would you like to give us so that we can do sensible things with you in the right direction? I think, Sunjid, you know Srioptimus really well. You attended the 25th anniversary at Ulaanbaatar a few months ago with us, and we sat together, which was lovely because we got to know each other a little bit better. Some of the work that we do is quite significant, especially in our countries with poverty, and we do turn it around where every $7 makes a difference to a woman, a family, a female, a family, or a future when it comes to education and economic empowerment. So over to you, Sunjid.
Well, if we think about the possibility, what we should do, we can make a long list. So if we, if we make some priorities, prioritizing issues. First one is about the legislation, and it should be addressed to the parliament. And second one is the implementation. It should be addressed to our government agencies and authorities and local governance. And if I think about the soroptimist, what we can do together with the soroptimist, I would say, first of all, we can cooperate with NGOs and with local NGOs, especially who are working in the provinces at the local level, because as you saw in Mongolia, in village, in provinces, it's very rare that we have a few NGOs we have in remote areas. That's why it's the one thing. If we support the local NGOs, it's the best cooperation, I would say. First idea, first suggestion, first thought is about that. And second thought, how can we encourage this woman in vulnerable situation? So maybe we can establish some fund, and with the fund they can make a response immediately, because that's there is a lack here in Mongolia. For example, the National Human Rights Commission receives complaints from the citizens directly, and some are requesting immediate response, and they want us some protection, and they want us some financial support, and we don't have that. Yeah, we have some fund, but it's legal way. In the legal way, we need a time to make some reimbursement, to make some expenses. So that's why we have the human rights defenders law. Might be you know about it. We adopted law on legal status on human rights defenders, and now we receive all kinds of complaints regarding the human rights defenders. And human rights defenders ask from us the protection, immediate support, financial and psychological. It's both in a both way, but we can't offer sometimes this financial support immediately. That's why we are asking from the trust fund, from UN, and we are cooperating with the donor organizations. So that's why in these directions, optimists can also make some contribution and support, but not the national level. Maybe it's better if you could, if it's possible, could support in local NGOs and local citizens groups and local activities. So that's my thought. And if you have a more question about it, Donnell, then I would like response you.
Yes. Well, this year we funded 8 new homes in Darkham, up near the Russian border. So 8 new homes for widows and for women who are escaping violence, but they have to meet special criteria. They met the criteria that the home and the land would be in the woman's name. Therefore, if she did get a partner in future, he can't lay claim to that. So the children and the woman have that security. That was something that we did on the ground, and that was funding. But we can do systemic things, and with meaning changing laws and advocating, running petitions, helping with changing the system rather than putting band-aids on every person who comes. We want to stop, and some of that comes through awareness, and some of that comes through advocacy. So we do a whole lot of strange things. So I'm sure we can. I'm sure we were able to address some of those issues, and sometimes when you're drowning in it, it's very hard to answer those questions. So I'd like to hand over to Lorainne now about what do you think that Soroptimists can do in Australia, because we do different things in Australia. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think there are a whole range of things, both in terms of, as I mentioned before, the things each of us as individuals can do to bring human rights to life. But I think as an organisation, as a community of women, the thing I would really encourage you to think about is not looking for quick fixes, but to think about the root causes of some of these issues and problems. And particularly when we're thinking about online safety, cyber violence, protecting women and children in digital spaces, we need to think about responses that are going to actually address those root causes and be rights respecting. And so I'd really encourage you to advocate for education and awareness raising, to look at digital literacy, and to think about how we can lift up the whole community to ensure that these spaces are safe, rather than trying to ban the problem, block the problem, legislate the problem away. We actually need to get right down to the heart of it and think about how can we engage in these things in a rights respecting way that's safe, but that doesn't just restrict or squash our human rights in the process. So to my mind, the biggest thing that we can do is focus on education and awareness.
Yes, we can do that. Yes, we can do that. Our concerns, of course, recently just turned to the manosphere and our boys, because they are more vulnerable. They don't grow up as quickly as girls. They might be in that vulnerable situation until they're 21, whereas, you know, a 12-year-old boy is little to child. A 12-year-old girl sometimes is much more mature. So we do have to have a different lens for if we're going to look at parents dealing with both genders. But yes.
And could I add in one thing very quickly, Danelle, on that point? Because yes, I'm the mother of a 13-year-old boy and a 10-year-old girl, and I'm really obviously worried about my girl feeling safe and secure and equal in the world. But I'm actually also really concerned about my son, not in terms so much of falling into the manosphere, which I know is a big risk, but actually the fact that he's really being told by a lot of people that there's something about masculinity that is inherently violent and wrong and dangerous. And I think we need to find ways of creating spaces for our boys, for them to understand that actually being a man is something to be proud of, and to be a respectful, contributing member of our community is something that we should expect from our men and is natural for men, rather than this tendency. We've had some boys commenting recently that they feel as though they're being told that they will inevitably grow up to be violent. And I worry about the message we're sending them in terms of pushing this idea that there's something inevitable about being a violent man, when actually both men and women have a really important role to play in our community.
Yes, the two hands come together. One hand cannot clap by itself. Yes, exactly. Okay, so I'll hand over now to Sri about what recommendations would you give to seroptimists in Malaysia. I know that you know Sarada very well, and you've been together on a few panels as well, but I think I'd like to get some ideas about what you'd like to do in Malaysia.
Thank you. For me, seroptimists already have two huge strengths. You're close to communities and you're heard by policymakers. Now that combination to me is powerful. So I would suggest 4 things. I'm going to steal some of Lorainne's time because she was quite short. First, use your voice as witnesses. You hear what women and children tell you long before it appears in any official report. So notice and document the patterns you see: cyber violence, extortion, misogynistic harassment, platforms and schools that don't respond, police reports that go nowhere. That lived reality is exactly what needs to be fed into universal periodic reviews. And when we talk about access to justice, you can walk into those spaces and say, this is what we are seeing on the ground and this is what we must change. So you have that power. Second, I would ask that you champion safety by design, not just bans. I would love to see seroptimists pushing governments and regulators to move beyond blaming parents and to require platforms to build safer products for women and children. That means minimum standards across all the digital spaces children actually use, like social media, messaging apps, gaming platforms, YouTube, and even those small mobile games with chat or friend lists that look harmless but are not. And from a child's point of view, it is all one social space. So your advocacy can shift the question from why are children online to why aren't these products safe by default for children, right? Third, I would say invest in training and literacy and make that your flagship. If I could ask you to prioritize one thing, it would be this: support programs that give children, parents, teachers, and community leaders very practical skills: how to recognize grooming and sextortion, how to respond when a child discloses, how to preserve evidence, how to support a friend who's being abused online, and how to navigate reporting pathways without causing more harm. In Malaysia, we're really constrained because when you go to report something in the police station, they're asking for an identity. So when I, as an NGO, go and report something because a child has rang me up and said, this is happening to me, the police are asking me to disclose the child's identity. And of course, what the child is telling me is completely in confidence. Sometimes the child is not comfortable to reveal that information to anyone else, but the child needs that material to be taken down or steps to be taken. And the police are like, oh, no, 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 we need an identity. So, these kind of navigating, we need people like the Sriuidhya to help us to push for that. And make sure that boys are in the room. Lorainne has said it, and I said it earlier. We cannot build a safer world for girls and women if we leave boys out. Very frequently, I get asked to run programs just for girls, and people tell me we have funding, but it's only for girls. And so then I always say, no, I'm so sorry, I cannot do that. Because boys, not only are boys targets for bullying and sextortion, and sometimes peers and partners who will either reinforce harm or help to stop it, we have evidence that training boys works. So, for example, a study in Turkey found that when boys and men understood gender equality and harms of child early and forced marriages, their acceptance of child marriage dropped sharply. So when you change boys' attitudes, practices start to change. This is evidence-based. The same principles apply online. If we teach boys what respect and consent look like in digital spaces, then we are protecting girls and boys, not just today, but in the future too. And fourthly, I would echo what Sunjid has said: support frontline NGOs in a very concrete way. Organizations like mine, we do not receive government funding, partly because we're willing to speak very plainly when responses are reactive or headline driven. I'm not going to sit down and think, oh, I should not say this, I might not get my funding. So we pay a price for that independence. Sriuidhya can make a real difference by funding and partnering with NGOs like this that are doing the unglamorous work of training, case support, and policy advocacy. Your resources and networks can help scale the programs that governments have chosen not to invest in. And if you see yourselves not only as service providers, but as witnesses, advocates, funders, and trainers grounded in a rights-based approach, Sriuidhya can shape how our countries respond to cyber violence and other human rights challenges in a very real and lasting way.
That is brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. That very practical, very practical. And now I'd like to close the official part with Syliva, and then we'll open for Q&A. So we've had a very broad range of discussion. So over to you, Syliva.
Thank you, Danelle. I can be short and sweet here because the Human Rights Commission have offered up 3 clear recommendations for Sriuidhya. The first being amplify the voices of women and girls who face the greatest barriers, especially Fahini Mari, Pacific, migrant, disabled and gender diverse women. The second, advocate for systematic change, including stronger online safety laws, equitable pay, and inclusive participation in decision making. And the last one, partner with communities to uphold human rights for all, ensuring women and girls can live with dignity, safety, and equal opportunity. So that's very short.
Yes, but what a wonderful scope to just end our discussion on. Now, I'm conscious that we've only got a short time for Q&A, so I'd like to quickly just ask Christine Johnson and Cesarina Gigenti about our audience. They've been very good listening to all of these stories about questions. Over to you.
Can you hear me, Danelle?
Yes, we can hear you.
We have a few questions from Indira. How can Seroptimist clubs across Southeast Asia Pacific collaborate more strategically on human rights challenges so that our advocacy is stronger, more unified, and more impactful across countries?
Oh, across countries is a bit of a trick. I guess this comes to our ASEAN countries, and it'll come to our what we do in UNSCAP. So this is making regional laws, and this is really important because it dovetails into the modern slavery. It dovetails into the other sorts of things because these young people and women are being coerced and blackmailed and that sort of thing. So that's the entree into the priorities for UNSCAP, but I'd like to get the teams, our wonderful people, our guests, to answer that one. Who wants first go? You look like you were going to jump on that, Lorainne.
Oh, it is a question that I love because I spent some time working in the Australian mission to ASEAN, and I think one of the things we often lose sight of is ASEAN actually does, I think, lead the world in terms of cooperation in so many respects, because while there is significant diversity within the different countries that make up our region, the values that guide us and the frameworks that are there in place are actually stronger than many people understand. And so I think when we talk about cooperation and collaboration, it doesn't mean uniformity. It doesn't mean we need to have the exact same laws in place across all of our countries, but it means we have to be very clear about what those guiding values are. We need to learn from each other, and we need to put in place cooperative mechanisms to allow us to share ideas and to cooperate when there are human rights issues like modern slavery, like human trafficking, like cyber violence that actually cross borders. Because I think the reality of the world today is human rights violations don't sit neatly within the boundaries of any one country. They cross borders and really require us to cooperate and collaborate. And so I think there's actually a lot the world can learn from ASEAN in terms of the frameworks that you can have in place to help facilitate that cooperation in a very practical way. But again, the starting point is to have us all actually talking to each other and making sure that we're learning from each other's experiences, and sharing with each other the things that are working, but also the things that aren't and where the gaps are.
Hello? Hello?
I was saying that is great, and that's an opportunity for Seroptimists when we're doing our international advocacy to take that on board, and we will probably feed that into our Commission for the Status of Women recommendations. So Cesarina, and would anyone else like to answer that question? What we can do across our countries together?
I would just tag on to what Lorainne is saying by saying that we can have expert sharing and we can have multi country conversations, in the sense that in Malaysia, I mean, I'm not sure about other countries, but in Malaysia, there is definitely a reluctance to accept like local experts feedback. But if we have someone else from 3-4 countries and everyone is saying, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel, like these are not problems that are just unique to just us. Everyone is facing the same issues, and especially cross-border issues. The world is no longer bound within your passport. So definitely that's something that Seroptimists can do. For example, a couple of years ago, I had this plan to do a talk for judges in Malaysia, but I wanted to bring in judges from Australia, from New Zealand, from America, from various different countries, to talk about how each country handled family law issues when it comes to children, because we see that children are really left by the side when two parents are fighting, you know, and different countries have different systems. Australia on its own has got multiple systems. So Victoria has one way of handling it, and another state has a different way of handling it. And some of those things are really innovative. And judges, for example, would really benefit from that kind of sharing that comes in. And because it's not an NGO telling them do it like this, but another judge from a different jurisdiction saying it, they could actually adapt and adopt those things and make a difference. We had to abandon the idea because we just couldn't get the funds for it, because who are we going to get those kind of funds from? It was a big project, getting different people from different places, but definitely, I mean, that would be something very much what Sir Optimus can do, because you can bring in experts from your sister countries, and it would not even be a problem, you know. So those kind of things really beneficial.
We have an opportunity in October, November for 56 countries to come together on those legal issues, and their focus this year, of course, is children and adolescents. So I think we have the opportunity to do that, but we can talk about that offline. Now, Sunjid, do you have any ideas of what you'd like to do across our porous borders? We have porous borders in Asia. We have very strong borders in New Zealand and Australia, but in Asia we have people moving all the time. Sunjid, would you have any opinions?
We can have a public awareness activity. We can learn from each other because, you know, here in Mongolia we have a problem that victims of cyber bullying or victims of domestic violences, they are bullied also by social media. It's a stereotype here. So if we talk about this domestic violence issue, or if we talk about the cyberbullying issue, then on the social platform, they are judging these victims too. Yeah, maybe you were not, honestly, and maybe you started the women's all the time, starts that kind of fighting, etc., etc., etc. That's why one large issue, how can we actually make some contribution for public? Victims are, they should be protected. Not they should be not bullied again from the public, from the investigators. So that's one really concerning issue. That's why I'm thinking about how can we make some contribution on that issue, because New Zealand and Australia, and I don't know how is the situation in Malaysia, but definitely Australia and New Zealand can make some public awareness activity together or share some best experience on that topic.
We have
public
crime, yes.
Police officials, and for publics and for journalists. How can we handle with these victims, and how from what kind of view we should make statement, or we should prepare some this information. So yeah, I'm thinking about that.
Okay. Sylvia, did you have an opinion, or shall we go to another question?
I'll have a go. When I think about the question, how can clubs collaborate more strategically? You know, I think more about a higher level. You know, Danelle, like your level, what can you do in terms of helping the different countries and clubs working together? And that might mean looking at I don't know, possibly trying to find out the most important thing that some of the clubs are you know, have a real issue with. What's that most important aspect? And can many of the clubs do anything about it? You know, and that, of course, that's going to be in our program focus reports. Perhaps we can do something around that, or off reports that we know where something has succeeded and worked really well in one country, might work well in another country. as we know that
Yeah,
already anyway.
I'm thinking about our best practice awards, but the way that we do them, sometimes the best practice awards are not the ones that have been nominated, and our program team see these wonderful things, but no one necessarily gets to see them unless they nominate for a best practice award. So we may have to look at a different way of doing that. So I'll hand over to Cesarina if there's other questions. That one was quite significant. Thank you. Cesarina?
To all the panelists, are you happy about the current legislation in your country in terms of women and children's human rights protection from cyber violence, etc., etc.?
I think the general answer is no, but I'll hand over to whoever would like to take that one. I don't think we're ever going to be happy, but anyway. Anybody?
Well, yes, I'll just talk about what's happened recently in New Zealand, if that's all right. So I mentioned earlier very briefly, because it wasn't in the New Zealand Commission's statement, but this was something that I looked up earlier. The New Zealand Parliament recently passed new legislation that creates a standalone criminal offence of stalking. This is seen as being significant because until now, stalking was only dealt with under older harassment laws that didn't keep pace with modern behaviour or digital technology. So the new law recognises that stalking is not a single incident, but a pattern of behaviour that causes fear, distress, or loss of safety. It comes into force in the middle of next year, allowing time for the police and courts to update their processes. But what's really interesting is under the new offence, a person can be charged if they carry out at least 2 acts of stalking within a 2-year period. And these acts can be physical, such as following or watching someone, but can also be online or digital. I don't know how we're going to measure that, but there you go. Examples include persistent unwanted messages, tracking someone's location, doxing, interfering with their relationships, or repeatedly damaging their property or reputation. And the maximum penalty for stalking is now up to 5 years imprisonment. So I think that's going to make a real difference. So hopefully.
Good. It's good to hear some good news stories. We've only got a few more minutes left. So what would you like to do? One more question, or shall we just close now? Okay. Do we have more questions? And can we? Yeah. Should we take
a few more questions and comments? I don't know if you.
Is it possible for us to take them on notice? And can you bring a few of them together?
I have been bringing a few together.
Okay.
So about another five or six questions and some comments around health and well-being and cyber harassment. So we've covered the cyber harassment.
The health and well-being sounds interesting. It sounds like the mental health approach, which quite a few.
Right. I just want to say thank you for everyone for joining us today. The conversations have been pretty meaningful. Your insights, your questions, and your shared experiences definitely have made this webinar truly impactful. A special thank you to our speakers and representatives from the 4 countries for shedding light on the challenges and inspiring work being done to promote justice, visibility, and safety for women and girls. Let's continue these conversations in our clubs and our communities and our everyday lives, because I believe that creating safer digital and physical spaces requires all of us. Thank you once again, and we look forward to seeing you at SISEAP event. So stay safe and stay engaged. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll put the questions on notice in an email. Thank you very much. And thank you for the back end people to being able to pull us together across all these countries, despite all the technology challenges that we have. And on that note, good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck. Bye.
Good
Bye.
night.